Corbyn's crisis deepens. Now even the Prime Minister tells him to quit. On another difficult day for the Labour leader, he was dragged away from reporters trying to question him. This after the Prime Minister said he should resign for the sake of the country.
He talks about job insecurity and my 2 months to go. It might be in my party's interest for him to sit there. It's not in the national interest, and I would say, for heaven's sake, man, go!
So tonight they're off. The first contenders are up and running in the Tory leadership stakes.
The death toll rises after the suicide bomb and gun attack on Turkey's main airport.
And how Statin confusion is putting lives at risk.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. It's not often a Prime Minister calls for the leader of the opposition to quit, but it happened today, a measure of the crisis in which Jeremy Corbyn is now engulfed. Mr Corbyn is clinging on this evening, despite that brutal attack from David Cameron, who said the Labour leader should go in the national interest. His predecessor, Ed Miliband, also urged him to stand down.
At one point today, ITV News understands Mr Corbyn did come close to quitting, telling a top aide that he had had enough. But there's also support for him from new party members and also from the unions. Our Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp has the latest on another breathless day for Labour.
Questions to the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister's questions is usually a chance for MPs to rally round their leader, but this was no ordinary Prime Minister's questions.
Jeremy Corbyn.
It wasn't clear from which side the muted cheers came, nor the ripple of laughter. Jeremy Corbyn's new shadow cabinet was sitting either side of him. The old one had walked out since the weekend, and throughout, Labour MPs sat in silence as their leader tried to plough on.
The Prime Minister has 2 months left. Will he leave a one-nation legacy? And will that one-nation legacy be the scrapping of the bedroom tax, the banning of zero-hours contracts and cancelling of the cuts to universal credit?
And then from David Cameron, who, remember, had just lost the referendum and resigned his own leadership, this.
And I have to say to the honourable gentleman, he talks about job insecurity and my 2 months to go. It might be in my party's interest for him to sit there. It's not in the national interest, and I would say, for heaven's sake, man, go!
It was, to put it mildly, something you don't see every day. On the Labour benches, they simply shuffled their feet. Jeremy Corbyn did try to continue with the duties of opposition leader. There was an important visit to a Polish centre which had, since the referendum, suffered from racial abuse. But even here, there were moments where he could not escape questions about his leadership.
Mr Corbyn, a quick question about the leadership.
It was not a question he was allowed to answer, but it was in the car on the way from here that the deputy, Tom Watson, urged Mr Corbyn to resign. He would not, but a similar message was delivered to the current leader from a previous one.
People from all wings of the party in Parliament have lost confidence in Jeremy, so sadly I believe he has to go.
So tonight the party awaits a challenge from Angela Eagle. She's held off all day, hoping the leader might resign.
I'm not giving any comments today. I'm going to get in my car and go to work.
Jeremy Corbyn is still at work tonight, so the ball is now in her court. It is a slow-motion car crash and it is not over yet.
Chris, a lot of people watching this will be frankly amazed that Mr Corbyn is clinging on like this. What is keeping him going?
And Mark, I think people would be right to ask that question. The answer, however, is quite simple, that Jeremy Corbyn owes his leadership and he takes his cue from Labour Party members, not from MPs, even if those MPs are members of the shadow cabinet or former party leaders, as Ed Miliband is. And what you hear from Mr Corbyn's office time after time is that Jeremy Corbyn was democratically elected to do this job as leader of the Labour Party. Now, I understand from a Labour Party source that at some point in the last day or so, Mr Corbyn has considered throwing the towel in, but one of his aides, his Director of Strategy strategy and communications has urged him to stay on. The party office denies that. However, I think the decision by Tom Watson, the deputy leader tonight, to say that Mr Corbyn should go is significant, because remember, Tom Watson was also elected by the party, and that the fact he said that means quite a lot.
All right, on it goes. Chris, thanks very much indeed.
David Cameron appeared in the Commons today as the first British PM in 4 decades to be frozen out of an EU leaders' summit. The message he brought back from those leaders was unchanged. Britain will not be able to cherry-pick its terms for leaving the EU. Nicola
Sturgeon, on the other hand, said she had got a very sympathetic response from her talks about Scotland's future in the EU. Our Europe editor James Mates reports from Brussels.
The leaders of Europe have a little more elbow room around the top table these days. For the first time in 43 years, the British seat is empty. The symbolism is powerful, but so is the message the 27 are sending. Britain's not going to be able to form alliances or seek separate deals. And on the central question of access to the single market, while restricting freedom of movement, no compromise. They hear news from London that Boris Johnson is now pledging, no less, that the UK can both, point 3, control our borders, and point 4, trade freely in the single market. This, they point out, is not in his gift.
Access to the single market requires acceptance of all 4 freedoms, including the freedom of movement. There will be no single market à la carte.
And from the French today, a direct threat to the City of London that much of its euro trading will now be forced to move to the Eurozone.
On doit bien comprendre que
They have to understand, said President Hollande, that they can't just hang on to their existing advantages. You can't just say, what we have, we keep, what you have, we negotiate over. That doesn't work. There was one British leader in Brussels today as the SNP's Nicola Sturgeon toured the Parliament and the Commission on a simple mission.
I'm here to protect Scotland's place in Europe.
At this stage, it doesn't seem Brussels can do much for her beyond laying the groundwork for a future relationship.
Is it realistic that you can actually stay in, or is it just getting a better deal for Scotland when the UK leaves?
Look, Scotland voted to stay in, and as First Minister, I've got a duty to seek to give effect to what people in Scotland voted for. So look, I don't underestimate the difficulty of the process that lies ahead or the challenging path that we face, but I'm determined to do everything I can to try to give effect to what people in Scotland voted for.
But they're already running into some headwinds, with the Spanish Prime Minister saying today he'll block any separate deal with Scotland. If the UK leaves, Scotland leaves, he says. They have their own separatist problem in Catalonia and don't want to encourage breakaways. So for the time being, it's just a polite hearing.
Scotland won the right to be heard in Brussels, so I will listen carefully to what the First Minister will tell me.
These are early days, and Scotland is still seen as an internal British issue. But when the UK does put itself on the Article 50 conveyor belt to the exit, expect to see the Scots hear a great deal more. James Mates, ITV News, Brussels.
The nominations for who will succeed Mr Cameron as Conservative leader and therefore become Britain's next Prime Minister have been open now for just over half an hour.
Yes, already 2 people, the Work and Pension Secretary, Stephen Crabb, and the former Defence Secretary, Liam Fox, have both thrown their hats into the ring. But as our political editor, Robert Peston, reports, all eyes are on the big beasts still prowling the sidelines.
Stephen Crabb. The candidate, the first, in fact, for the vacancy at the top of the Tory party and at number 10.
I was brought up to understand that nothing gets handed to you on a plate. On the rainy rugby fields of West Wales, I learnt that it's not a question of waiting for the ball to pop out of the back of the scrum. If you want it, you do what's required and you get your hands on it.
Not an Etonian like the current Prime Minister and Boris Johnson, brought up on a council estate by a single mum in Wales. The Work and Pension Secretary says he's the man to unite a Conservative Party split by the European Union vote.
The message that I'm communicating through my leadership bid is that the quicker that we move past the labels of Remain and Leave, the better.
You said that you want our economic relationship with the European Union to be as close as it is now. But you also said that you want to control immigration. Now, many people would say that's being either naive or disingenuous.
What came out really, really clear to us during the referendum campaign was that the thing that mattered most for the people of this country was actually getting back control of our immigration. No more open borders. Now, it is going to be very challenging to reconcile that with the same kind of full access to the single market that we have at the moment.
But another potential challenger disagrees that immigration control trumps prosperity.
If we want that strong economy to carry on delivering, obviously, on our public service and everything else, immigration and people coming here to work is a key part of that. It's essential both for business but for our public services.
Now, the big hitters, Boris Johnson and Theresa May, will join the contest tomorrow.
I think Theresa is somebody who actually, when it comes to that negotiating table, and there's going to be some really tough, serious negotiations to be had going forward. Her track record of doing exactly that in Europe, I think, speaks for itself.
Boris is somebody who's advocated leave. People trust him to deliver on that, and that is incredibly important.
A wind of change from Europe for Conservative Party and country. Robert Peston, ITV News.
And Robert is in Downing Street now, and I understand you've got news of a fresh twist in this Tory leadership battle. Tell us all.
Well, the contents to be the next occupant of that place has literally just started. It's already a bit bonkers. There's been the leak to Sky News of an email from Sarah Vine to Michael Gove. She's his wife. She's a columnist on the Daily Mail, and she's telling him to play hardball in return for the support that he's giving to Boris Johnson, who, as you know, is one of the favourites to succeed David Cameron. Now, the aspect of this email that caused a bit of a frisson is she says that only Michael Gove can deliver to Boris Johnson the support of Paul Dacre, the editor of the Daily Mail, a very powerful figure in the media, and Rupert Murdoch, the owner of The Sun, another very powerful figure in the media. Why did this cause a frisson? It's because at the heart of Boris Johnson's attack on Brussels was that it was run by a bunch of unaccountable elitists, and here we seem to be seeing evidence that Michael Gove and Boris Johnson are trying to do a deal with the unaccountable elite of the British media.
Robert Peston and Downing Street, thank you.
The FTSE 100 rose this afternoon, winning back all its post-Brexit vote losses. The index closed at its highest level since April, finishing 3.6% higher. The pound was also up to $1.35, rising 2 cents.
And a new action plan on tackling hate crime is to be published, the Prime Minister said, after an apparent increase in incidents over the last few days. A Polish shopkeeper at this business in Leeds was one of a number of victims of alleged racial abuse.
Now, tonight's other main story, and at least 41 people are now known to have died in last night's terror attack at Istanbul's main airport. Turkey is blaming the so-called Islamic State for the gun and suicide bomb attack, which also injured 239 people. Ataturk Airport is one of the world's biggest tourist hubs, handling some 61 million passengers a year. The attack began with a gun battle involving security forces near an X-ray checkpoint. At least one of the gunmen ran into the airport, firing at passengers. The three attackers then blew themselves up, one at the entrance and two inside the airport itself. Shocking footage emerged today of the terrified passengers fleeing for their lives amid the gunfire and explosions. Our security editor Rohit Kashru has the latest from the scene.
A sleeper cell ordered to attack. Confusion, panic, gunfire, explosions. This was Brussels all over again, but different. Because in peeling away Istanbul's extra layers of security, IS might have just launched one of its most sophisticated attacks yet.
Recep, gel sen de gel!
This video shows one of the attackers as he's shot by the police. He detonates a suicide bomb. But minutes before, the attackers were just faces in the crowd, wearing battlefield black, apparent tourists turned terrorists. It's thought their intention was to take hostages One used his gun to try to smash into the departure lounge.
We are so scared and just
lay down, and I saw one terrorist kırmak nedir? Broke the window to the gate and running to the plane.
A mother was so convinced she'd be killed, she scrawled her daughter's details on her arm to help someone locate her.
if I kill be alive, his name and phone number and the country to give them my daughter to my family.
Identifying so-called Islamic State as the likely culprits, the Turkish Prime Minister said terror is a threat to all countries. They must work together against terrorism. But it's a threat to this country more than most, and to this airport more than most. This should have been one of the safest places in Turkey, but the gateway of choice for IS fighters has become a target for one of the most extraordinary assaults. Well, American counter-terrorism officials say they believe there might have been dozens more members of this cell coming near the end of Ramadan and after the daylight fasting hours. They believe that this attack may well have been a response to calls from IS commanders for its followers to launch a huge assault during the holy month. Perhaps the most important question here, though, is how Turkey chooses to respond to this.
All right, Rohit, thank you very much indeed.
Here, doctors say thousands of people are at risk from heart attacks or stroke because of confusing advice over statins. More than 200,000 patients have stopped taking the cholesterol-lowering drug after articles were published about possible side effects. It's our science correspondent, Alok Jha.
Millions of Britons take statins every day, part of a strategy to reduce their risk of heart attacks and strokes. Side effects are rare, but a report published 2.5 years ago in the British Medical Journal questioned the safety of the drugs. For 6 months, there was widespread confusion. And now the author of a new report says that confusion had health consequences.
The worry was that these misleading claims may have scared people too much, and people who really could benefit from statins and needed statins stopped taking them.
The study looked at statin prescriptions for 700,000 people aged 40 and above. Scientists found that around 219,000 people stopped taking their statins early in the 6 months after the safety concerns arose. They predicted this could lead to more than 2,000 extra cardiovascular events, such as heart attacks and strokes, over the next 10 years. 41-year-old Joel Bond's mother and grandfather both died of heart attacks, and he's not taking any chances.
I think people get concerned when they read these scare stories. I know for me that taking statins has reduced my chances of having a heart attack from high to lower than the national average.
The debates will no doubt go on among some scientists. For patients, today the benefits of statins will seem to be a little clearer. Alok Jha, ITV News.
26 school children have been found safe after they went missing in the Brecon Beacons Mountains in South Wales. They were located by helicopter rescue crews following a major search operation. The teenagers were at the National Park as part of their Duke of Edinburgh Awards.
Now, earlier in the programme, we told you how Europe's leaders are standing firm over any post-Brexit deals on immigration controls and the single market, two of the big issues, of course, that help define voters' choice in the EU referendum.
In the last of her series from the English heartlands of the Midlands, our social affairs editor Penny Marshall has been to a village in Leicestershire to get their view of the Brexit aftermath.
In the shires that voted leave, there are few regrets about the decision to break free. But at the stables, there is growing frustration with a political leadership seemingly scornful of the people's choice.
I resent their comments. I knew exactly what I was voting for. I was voting to get my country clear of Brussels and the bureaucracy that comes out of it. If it makes me slightly poorer in the aftermath, then so be it. I'm willing to accept that.
And at the nearby garden centre there was also frustration, not with the political direction, but with the lack of it.
I think we need a strong leadership that will tell us what we can do now and where we're headed.
because there's been a lot of talk about coming out of something, but not what we've gone into.
And these Leave voters said the politicians were failing to seize an opportunity to forge a new future.
I want the country to regain its identity. Absolutely, I knew what I was doing. I wanted the government to listen, and as much as any people could be turning around saying this is about the European Union, it's not. It's about our country, and it's about the way our country is performing worldwide. We're not just part of Europe, we're part of the world.
And here, where there is affluence, immigration appears to matter less than independence to those who voted Leave, and they've not appreciated the backlash.
People call us ignorant, stupid, ill-educated, ill-informed, misled and racist. I mean, I'm Scottish, my wife's Chinese. I don't see how I can be a racist.
There may be nostalgia for times past when life in England seemed simpler, but there's also now a longing to move forward. If most of the politicians didn't like the way the people voted, most of the people here don't like the way the politicians have reacted. Penny Marshall, ITV News, Leicestershire.
And finally, not so very long ago, Marcus Willis was an unknown journeyman Brit, fed up and on the brink of giving up his tennis career. Well, what a difference a few weeks make.
OK, so playing Roger Federer on centre court was a tough task for the world number 772. But largely thanks to his girlfriend, he's had quite a day in the limelight, as our sports correspondent Ian Payne reports.
For Marcus Willis and girlfriend Jennifer Bate, these last few weeks have been...
madness. Madness. If you gave me one word, it'd be madness, yeah.
You enjoying it?
Yeah, loving it.
But if it wasn't for his girlfriend, he wouldn't even be playing here.
It was my brother that said, you know, this guy is a really good player, Jen, you know, what's he doing? So when he said he was thinking of moving to America, I was like, that's it, you're not going, can't do it. Stay.
Didn't have a choice, really.
I like this one.
Determined to enjoy his day, the world number 772 even watched the previous match on centre court. But as he prepared to begin his match, he was loving every minute. He was outclassed early on, but he did have the odd moment.
Oh, come on, Marcus, get up. Oh, this is unbelievable.
Mum and Dad looked tense. Girlfriend and sister couldn't take their eyes off it. He didn't win a game in the first set, but then, early in the second... It was a valiant effort, but despite winning many more games, it was Federer who came through in the end. Well, thank you to Marcus Willis for brightening up what's been a really gloomy day weather-wise today. It was a shaft of light. Elsewhere, not much tennis, but Joanna Konta, the British women's number one, came through. She had a game that was held over from yesterday. She won in straight sets. But despite her efforts, I think today definitely belongs to Marcus.
Ian Payne, thank you.
And that's it. Julie Etchingham will be here at 10.
That from all the team here. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.